Hello everybody, welcome back. Happy New Year. I know it's almost the end of the month, but the holidays can be a bitch. Before I begin, I just want to give a very special happy 45th birthday to my second favorite album of all time, Pink Floyd's Animals. If you haven't heard it, check it out. But on with the show. Some people hate disco and some people really hate disco. Throughout the years, we can pinpoint certain events in history that have impacted the world in a major way. For example, the Moonwalk by Michael Jackson, the first time Van Halen played Eruption, or the first time you heard it on the album, or the day that the music died, where Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, and Buddy Holly died in a fiery plane crash. This event also had a very fiery grave. So on the evening of July 12, 1979, during a doubleheader between the Chicago White Sox and the Detroit Tigers, we can say that is the day that disco died. Or more like straight up fucking murdered. Stay tuned. Hello everybody, my name is Rudy. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, I talk about music, mostly rock and metal, but occasionally I delve into other things like disco, for example. The 60s were a great decade, full of wonderful music that culminated with Woodstock in 1969, and also the Manson murders. But just as the era of peace and love came to an end, the consciousness of people began to change. The youth of the time became more and more depressed as time went on, and they needed an escape from the real world. Suddenly the music became darker and more sexualized than it had previously been. They went from happy drugs like weed, mushrooms, and acid to being gacked out on cocaine and lewds and PCP. It didn't matter the color of your skin. One thing was for sure, your nose was white from all the cocaine. And sometimes it turned red because of too much white. That just happens. Like, remember Jenny from Forrest Gump? That was based on real life shit. And if you were important enough or hip enough, if you could afford it, you would party at Studio 54. And you'd share bumps with the likes of David Bowie, Blondie. Shit, probably Mick Jagger was still doing coke at the time. I mean, because he still looks like it, you know? You get the point. Disco began as underground dance music that was played here and there in apartments and in small clubs throughout the city. People of all races and sexual orientations quickly caught on, and suddenly they were part of the party. By the mid-70s, it had grown so much that it became part of the mainstream of music. It became so popular that even fucking Kiss made a disco record. Yeah, that Kiss. Knights in Satan's Service. Those guys. By its peak, bands like the Bee Gees, Earth, Wind and Fire, ABBA, Casey and the Sunshine Band, and the Village People, they all became household names. People often point to Saturday Night Fever as the film that helped boost the popularity of the genre, and rightfully so. I mean, you can't think of disco without thinking of John Travolta dancing on that stupid dance floor, making that stupid doing that stupid dance. I mean, that's disco right there. So if Don't You Forget About Me being played in The Breakfast Club represents the 80s, John Travolta dancing in that scene represents disco in the 70s. I mean, it's been mocked in several films throughout the years. Specifically, I remember a Goofy movie doing a parody of it where Bigfoot somehow got a hold of a cassette player and it was playing Saturday Night Fever, and even he started doing the dance. At this time, there was rock and the beginnings of metal music. So when disco came along, some of those people were pissed. It was just so different. It didn't take you on a journey. It didn't make you think. It was just music to let loose to. I mean, there was such a conflict between people that liked disco and people that liked rock music. Even in Detroit Rock City, the guys fight with disco people, and they say something about Kiss will never make a disco record, which we all know came to pass. One rock radio DJ named Steve Dahl had had enough. Steve was fired on Christmas Eve of 1978 from the radio station he worked at, WDAI. He was hired at a competitor shortly after, but the reason he was fired was because the radio station was switching from from rock and roll to disco music. And so for this guy, it was the last nail in the coffin. He had to get back at disco somehow. I mean, he was understandably pissed off. He was hired by a radio station called WLUP, and any chance he would get, he would make fun of disco and his former employer. While working at the new radio station, he teamed up with a man named Gary Meyer, and together they would create anti-disco events around the city of Chicago, some which became violent. At one point, some of his fans, they chased his former employer's van, like a van with from his former employer. They chased it all the way to a park and cornered the driver, and the police had to be called. That time things ended peacefully, but another time after that, July the 1st of 1979, there was a fight that broke out during one of these events, and the police had to be called, and several people were arrested. Now, on to the main event. So, on July 12th, 1979, there was a doubleheader between the White Sox and the Detroit Tigers, where Steve Dahl and Gary Meyer organized an event that would take place between games. People were encouraged to bring any disco records they might have in their possession and bring them to the park because they were about to be blown up somewhere in the field. The incentive was that if you brought a record, you would be given a discount to get into the park for only 98 cents. On top of that, the booze was also discounted. Things never end well when the crowd is full of drunk people. Now, they were hoping for at least a crowd of 20,000 people, but almost 50,000 people showed up. Needless to say, shit went awry real quick. There were thousands of people that didn't get into the park that were still waiting to get in. Those people were drunk and gacked out on something too. So with all the unrest going on outside because they couldn't get in, the people inside started acting up too. Now they started throwing records onto the field like little frisbees. They started throwing empty bottles and lighters. They were starting to get really fucking asshole-ish and out of control. I mean, normally the game stops for rain. This time it was raining fucking bottles and records and lighters and raining blood. I mean, it was barbaric. I mean, at this point, if I were in charge of that whole event, I would have had second thoughts about going through with it. But history tells a different story. So at this point, when the first game ended, Steve, Gary, and a model that was there that threw the first pitch of the game, they gathered in center field. There was a giant box filled with records and explosives. The crowd went fucking ape shit as soon as Steve announced this. And I quote, "This is now officially the world's largest anti-disco rally. Now listen, we all took all the records you brought tonight. We got them in a giant box. And we're going to blow them up real good." And then you'd think that'd be the end of it. Job's done. Success. Go home, right? No. Now, a crowd of about 5,000 people rushed the field. Now, the crowd was being told to go back to their seats. They were encouraged to return to their seats, but they didn't. People were going double ape shit now. Ripping out grass from the field, ripping out the bases. It's even said that a young Michael Clark Duncan stole a baseball bat from the dugout. That's just what I read online. Don't quote me on that. Now, after a while, police finally showed up in full riot gear and started to bring order to the crowd. Now, if you were smart enough, you would have gotten the fuck out of there, because just 11 years prior, the Chicago police beat the fucking shit out of crowds of people and even murdered some. But that's a different story. You can look that up another time. Now, this was like a stake through the heart of disco music. In this case, disco was Dracula and the crowd was Van Helsing. A very drunken, gacked out version of Van Helsing. After that, the night was known as Disco Demolition Night. And for good reason. Sales after that went down significantly for anything even related to disco. People that were associated with the disco genre now said they were dance music. But, some people still remember. And it's all thanks to a very, very pissed off DJ. Sometimes I wish I had that influence, so I can get rid of fucking country music. That shit needs to go. At least just the current country music, because I do respect some of the older stuff. But this current, my Bible, my beer, and my truck, and my trailer house. No, that shit needs to die. So disco in the 70s was only around for really like 3 to 5 years tops. Nowadays, it's kind of making a comeback. The song I can think of right now is "Don't Start Now" by Dua Lipa, and it has a very disco feel to it. Now, personally, I didn't mind disco that much. I mean, I wasn't too into it, but looking back on it, it wasn't that bad, except for maybe the Bee Gees. I can't do the Bee Gees, but they had some bangers, and to this day, if you were to play like YMCA in a crowd, everybody's gonna fucking dance it. Even the toughest guy in the crowd is gonna be sticking his fucking hands up, doing the Y, the M, and the C, and the A. Now, like I said earlier, I don't think it was that bad, the music. There's been a bunch of other shit that's way worse since then. Like Eiffel 65, Aqua, Right Said Fred. You get the point. I could go on, but I'll leave it at that. Anyway, what are your thoughts? What genre nowadays needs to just die? Let me know in the comments. And subscribe if you ain't a bitch.